We're living in a pretty strange and frankly unsettling new era of global competition. It's this landscape where all the lines are blurry, the weapons are often totally invisible, and the real fighting, well, it happens in this weird space that isn't quite war, but it definitely isn't peace either. So let's try and break down this new age of conflict.
And that is a terrifying warning. It comes from a report by the International Institute for Strategic Studies. And trust me, that is not an exaggeration. It's actually the conclusion of a chillingly realistic war game they ran, just to see how new technologies could push the entire world right to the brink of total annihilation. Okay, so picture this. The whole scenario was just a tabletop exercise, but the implications are incredibly real. The ISS got a bunch of experts in a room, had them play the roles of top decision makers in Washington, Moscow, and Beijing, and then they just started throwing a series of tech-driven crises at them. The big question was, how close could the world actually get to a complete disaster? So, how did the chaos kick off? It began with disinformation. A mysterious group calling themselves the World Peace Guardians started circulating these unbelievably realistic AI-generated deepfake videos. That synthetic media where you can convincingly swap one person's face for another. And these videos, they appeared to show the families of top US officials evacuating Washington, D.C., which of course created the impression that America was gearing up for war. And this is where it gets even crazier. This digital deception was then amplified. See, the same group had already messed with the AI training data for Russia's missile early warning systems. It's a technique called data poisoning. So when those deepfake videos hit the internet, Russia's automated systems flagged them as credible threats, basically screaming to the Kremlin that a US missile launch could be just moments away. And then came the technological bombshell. A US tech company creates this brand new quantum sensing technology that can essentially see right through the oceans. This tech gets stolen, and someone uses it to publish the real-time locations of the world's nuclear submarine fleets for everyone to see online. Now, this completely erased their second strike capability. Think of that as the ultimate insurance policy, the ability to hit back after a surprise nuclear attack. With those subs exposed, that guarantee of retaliation was just gone. The very bedrock of nuclear deterrence shattered.
So here's the crucial point. All this chaos, this whole terrifying push toward global thermonuclear war, it wasn't started by a rival superpower. It was the work of a third party, a non-state actor, using a mix of publicly available and stolen private technology to try and pit the world's great powers against each other.
Okay, so this was just a simulation, but this whole fictional nightmare perfectly illustrates the new battlefield of the 21st century. It's a space where conflict is waged with code, with algorithms, and with economic pressure, often by players who aren't even nations. It actually has a name, and it's where most global competition is happening right now.
This new battlefield is called the gray zone. It's that murky, confusing limbo that exists between the black and white of traditional war and peace. To really get a handle on it, let's just look at the official definition. So here it is, straight from the US Special Operations Command. The really key phrases to pay attention to are state and non-state actors, which basically means anyone can get in on the action. And the idea that this all happens between the traditional war and peace duality. It's a space of constant, simmering competition.
Now, the core strategy of the gray zone, the thing that makes it so tricky, is that you operate just below the threshold of open war. The actions are aggressive, they're coercive, for sure, but they're designed with just enough ambiguity to avoid triggering a full-blown military response. The goal? To win without ever firing a single shot. Let's look at a brilliant, and honestly kind of sneaky, real-world example of this in action. In the South China Sea, China uses a gray zone tactic that one of its own PLA major generals has proudly called the cabbage strategy. So here's how it works. First, a contested island or reef gets swarmed by China's maritime militia. We're talking hundreds of boats that look like simple civilian fishing vessels, but they're actually controlled by the state. They create a blockade, wrapping the target layer by layer like a cabbage, isolating it and cutting off all supplies. Eventually, the defenders have no choice but to leave. And just like that, China takes territory with plausible deniability, all while staying below that critical threshold of war.
And the cabbage strategy really drives home a crucial point about this new era. In the gray zone, literally anything can be weaponized. Civilian infrastructure, our supply chains, commercial shipping, they're no longer just economic assets. They are now tools of coercion on the modern battlefield.
So if the battlefield has changed this dramatically, it only makes sense that the weapons have changed too. The new arsenal of conflict goes way, way beyond just guns and missiles. This new arsenal really falls into two main buckets. First, you've got all the technological tools, like the ones from our war game. You know, AI-driven deepfakes to sow confusion, data poisoning to corrupt an enemy's intelligence.
But just as important, if not more so, are the economic weapons. Imposing tariffs, using targeted sanctions to cripple entire industries,
Or weaponizing control over critical resources like energy or rare earth minerals to exert pressure. Now, this aggressive use of economic tools isn't totally new, but its comeback is a huge deal. One analysis calls it a renaissance of economic warfare, arguing that what we're seeing today is a return to the kind of behavior that was common in that really turbulent period between the world wars. You hear a lot of people reach for the new Cold War analogy to describe the tensions we're seeing today. But based on everything we've talked about, that might not be the best fit. I mean, the Cold War was a largely stable two-sided conflict. Our world today is way, way messier. So what's a better historical parallel?
Well, instead, a lot of historians are pointing to a much more sobering and chaotic parallel, the 1930s. It was a decade that was defined by economic collapse, the rise of authoritarianism, and this slow, grinding breakdown of the international order.
As historian David Ekblad puts it, the structured, two-sided competition of the Cold War is actually a pretty poor guide for today. Our world, with its multiple rivalries and eroding norms, looks a whole lot more like the chaotic and dangerous 1930s.
And the parallels are really striking. The Great Depression shattered people's faith in liberal capitalism, a lot like how the 2008 financial crisis really shook our faith in globalization. And in both of these periods, we saw a rise in authoritarian populism and the emergence of these so-called revisionist states that were determined to upend the existing world order. The poet W.H. Auden famously called the 1930s a low, dishonest decade. And it's such an apt description for a time of profound uncertainty, where all the established rules and international norms just seem to be dissolving, a feeling that is all too familiar today.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've talked about war games, gray zones, and echoes of the 1930s. What does this new era of conflict really mean for us? What are the big takeaways?
Here's the bottom line. We have to forget the simplicity of a two-sided Cold War. We now live in a messy, multipolar world, where the old, clean lines between war and peace have blurred into total irrelevance. And in this new reality, the most powerful weapons aren't missiles and tanks, but the invisible forces of code, sanctions, and disinformation. And this brings us to the final and most critical question. You see, the old tools of deterrence, they were designed for a world of visible threats, of armies you could see and missiles you could count. But in an age of invisible conflict, fought in the gray zone with unseen weapons, how do we even begin to define, let alone defend, the idea of peace?